Okay, reason. Oh, we're recording.
Yes, we are. Hello and welcome to the Josh and Tyler Show. Today we're talking about documentaries. I love documentaries. I love to learn something. I love new things. I love music documentaries. I love environmental documentaries. I love bias documentaries. Even if they're made by Michael Moore sometimes, I still love aspects of them. Being educational is awesome. That's what documentary stands for. We didn't get a chance to cover best documentary feature for the Oscars because, we didn't want to cover documentaries in 2021. So we thought, why don't we do best documentaries of all time? Ones that we enjoyed. And as Tyler said before we started recording, ones that almost hold a candle to genre films sometimes. So there's going to be very good ones on this list.
It doesn't happen very often. You either have to really understand the core of the subject that you're talking about, and with my top two, especially that focus on one particular person in each one, I felt that was the reason they stood out the most. And even though I was already fans of the people being discussed in the documentary, there were still so many brand new things about them that I had no idea, and just made them all the more fascinating. And with the one that you and I are going to overlap on, one of it really comes down to just how unique the presentation is and how much it doesn't technically break new ground unless we're counting theatrical documentaries, but it still does things that no one has ever seen before, no one would have ever thought of before. And that just motivates me to wonder what would happen if I made documentaries.
I actually went to school for documentary filmmaking, so it's the one genre of film I can say I spent too much money to fully understand. Fascinating course, nevertheless. I really wanted to be a filmmaker as opposed to a documentary filmmaker.
What made you decide that on being your major?
Well, when I went to school, I really wanted to make feature films, but there was no feature film degree. So I saw documentary filmmaking after I did general filmmaking and TV more than anything. And I thought, well, it gives me a chance to do whatever I want. I can make a documentary on bark chips. Yeah, I did that.
How sharp was it?
I made like a 10-minute documentary on bark chips just to prove I could do it. This is our tagline: bark chips, nature's Doritos.
Brought to you by the same people who gave us shit, Earth's chocolate.
I just wanted to. But documentary filmmaking did give me a look into the world of how to tell a proper narrative with drier material, which I think made me a better filmmaker in the long run. Not that my films are, the most amazing thing on the planet, but they did make me a better filmmaker. Saving Grace, June 5th. Check it out. Tyler, you got any honorable mentions here?
I have a few, and I was kind of wondering whether or not it would be a good idea to put some of these on my list. One of the first ones that I really got hooked onto at a very young age, way too young of an age given the subject matter, is a documentary called The Aristocrats, which is basically just Penn Jillette and Paul Provenza taking the shittiest home movie camera ever. It's shittier than this iPad I'm using right now, interviewing all of their friends, big time celebrities, about the Aristocrats joke, how they discovered the joke, the variations that they've used in their act, how it saved Gilbert Gottfried at the Hugh Hefner roast once he made a 9/11 joke.
That's a fun.
Have you ever heard of the Aristocrats joke?
I have not. I know Gilbert Gottfried. I know he's the voice of Iago, and he's sort of this sort of loud, controversial comedian, but I don't know more than that.
Oh, you're about to find out pretty soon. But just as an experiment, just as a dumb excuse to see comedians you love or hate tell the same joke and make it funny and prove that there's some actual technique to repeating the same material, it was worth checking out for me. As we were talking about before, I did have a good time checking out Ronnie's, which really raised some eyebrows for me before, because I love jazz music, but I don't know a ton about the history, and learning about one of the world's most popular clubs that was struggling to break even every single day, even though there were crowds like full of blocks of people trying to get in, and all these incredible celebrities like Van Morrison, Chet Baker, Nina Simone, and many others who were attracted to it just based on the craft, not the pay, but the craft. That was really impressive. And seeing Ronnie Scott as a club owner struggling with his persona because he loved to play the saxophone, but people knew him as the owner and as the MC and a really funny guy. And he had some problems with people judging him by the way he wanted to versus the way that he actually was. And as every interview points out, they all thought they knew him one way. And then if you ask the next person, it's like he was completely different in terms of personality. In regards to filmmaking documentaries, one of my favorites is Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures, which is like a 2-hour one going through every production of every film he was a part of from the perspective of his wife, his collaborators like Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson. Shelley Duvall says exactly what you would expect her to say about The Shining. So there was that. And just based on how he strived to gain the artistic freedom that he was known for, which he didn't really get to do until after Spartacus, because what a lot of people don't know is that he and Kirk Douglas did not agree on how to handle it, but Kirk Douglas was the producer. And on top of that, their script was written by blacklisted communists, so there were some complications there.
Trumbo is a great flick. I know it feels more like a made-for-TV movie based upon its time and dimension, but if you get a chance, you should 100% check out Trumbo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the last honorable mention is Jackie Chan, My Stunts, where on the set of Project A Part 2, he visually demonstrates how he creates, choreographs, and trains his stuntmen to create some of the best action sequences ever put to film, along with some of his inspirations like the Three Stooges, Charlie Chaplin, and Buster Keaton. Really the only American comics that he actually finds funny, because if you well, you and I both know in interviews he makes it clear he doesn't understand American sense of humor, especially with his Shanghai Noon series or the Rush Hour movies or The Spy Next Door, which I'd love to pretend.
Spy Next Door I do have a soft spot for in my heart. I like some of it, but it is a very messy film. I like when he beats up people with a BMX bike. That is fun. I will give them that.
I do kind of remember that bit, but yeah, there's so much. He explains how meticulous he goes into the camera work, the choreography, the effects. It's weird that Hong Kong has such a thriving film industry, but there are so many things they can't afford. They don't have the air mattress for a stunt jump that Hollywood has. They use Apple boxes and bed mattresses. And of course, the stunt people inherently have to know how to fall properly without breaking a bone in their body.
Well, Jackie Chan broke a few bones, as I'm sure they cover in Armor of God there.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the whole thing in Police Story 2 where he jumps through a window. He can see his bone sticking out of his arm. And he's like, but it's okay. It's just like, no, it's not okay. You know what? You laugh the Grim Reaper in the face, you're never going to die.
I mean, I think Jackie Chan's best stunt is in Who Am I? When he gets amnesia and he slides down the huge building.
Yeah.
And when he just yells at someone, which is one of my favorite Jackie Chan moments. Names!
Well, there's that in his 360 bungee jump later on in the movie.
Jackie Chan's just incredible. Like this man, I mean, even in The Foreigner, this man is still trying to do stunts when this movie doesn't clearly need any stunts.
I like The Foreigner.
I do. I don't know if it needs any stunts. I think this is a really good drama piece. So
I don't know. I liked seeing Jackie go full on Rambo. The one time he tripped that guy into like falling headfirst into a tree and then like covering his body with leaves. That was such a clever and Stallone move. My main problem with Foreigner is that they couldn't decide on which foreigner to focus on, the Chinese guy or the Irishman. Because Pierce Brosnan's Irish, isn't he?
Yeah, I think Pierce Brosnan is Irish, but I think he's European.
He's not English, and I think the Foreigner title was supposed to be like a double.
I mean, this is honestly, I like Pierce Brosnan in this movie, but this may be one of his worst performances. Jackie Chan's really great though.
I don't know. It was one of the few times I could take him seriously in The Foreigner.
There's a couple Pierce Brosnan movies that I just don't know why I watched multiple times.
Like November Man?
Not November Man. The one with there's one
Mamma Mia?
No, these are worse than those. We're just gonna go down a quick rabbit hole.
I'm sorry, what?
There's some really bad Pierce Brosnan romantic comedies that I watch, and I just somehow hold a special place in my heart.
Okay.
Yes. One, he's in that Eurovision movie, which I've ranted about. He is in The Love Punch. I don't know if you've seen The Love Punch. So The Love Punch is a half Spanish film, half English film where he falls in love with Emma Thompson.
That doesn't sound so bad.
They're like a retired couple, and it takes a very strange turn.
Okay.
Then there's Love Is All You Need, which is mostly a foreign film where he falls in love with someone at a vineyard, but it's slow and boring. And then there's the one he does with Jessica Alba, where he falls in love with her mother, then divorces the mother, and decides to date Jessica Alba, because that's a movie. So trust me, there's a lot worse. Jessica.
Wow.
Yeah. So November Man, Survivor, No Escape. These are great movies on the blip.
No Escape
Brosnan's
sucks.
career.
No Escape sucks. Brosnan was the only good thing about that movie. Yeah.
But there are worse Pierce Brosnan movies, and I have watched them.
Fair enough. Should we get back on track? Or?
Yes, I was gonna throw one out of that. I was gonna throw out It Might Get Loud. I don't know if you've seen this one.
That's Jack White and a couple other guitarists, right?
Yeah, Jack White, The Edge, and I forget the last guitarist, but it's all about guitars and music that made them. And it's a really fascinating hour and a half where basically three iconic guitarists sit in a room, discuss the music, and then they show you the music and how it was made. And then it's really interesting to see The Edge playing the White Stripe music, or Jack White inspired playing, like, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, some of those iconic U2 riffs. My brain is blanking on the last guitarist.
See, I remember Jack White. The opening is like Jack White building a guitar out of cheap stuff, and he's just like, who says you have to go out and spend a couple $100? And then in the YouTube section, everyone's just like, we need an amp,
The other one is Jimmy Page from Zeppelin, so you have that iconic in there. So them playing some of those iconic riffs on guitar, it's absolutely fascinating to watch. It was one of those ones I caught up for free on YouTube. I thought this is pretty good. Another one that's topical, but also very interesting one, John Lewis, Good Trouble, about the civil rights leader, John Lewis, who paid out the princess right before the pandemic hit.
I thought it was like wasn't it when you guys? Oh no, Do the Right Thing was when you guys reopened.
But the thing I find ironic about this, and one reason why I mention it, is this documentary comes out. We go to play. I watch it. It's informative. It tells you a lot about John Lewis and what he was trying to do, and it uses archive footage really well with narration and interviews with various people. But as soon as we put it out, one day before we play it, John Lewis dies. In real life, and I was like, oh boy, this is gonna go well.
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but that would mean more people would go and see it, wouldn't it?
No, it did not. That's not what it meant.
Oh shit.
It did okay. It did like
what you'd expect.
One that I personally love, and I am a huge pop music fan. There's certain artists that I just love in the pop music fan. I love Lady Gaga. I love Kesha. I love Katy Perry. I love all three. I love their music. I love their discography. I like what they're doing. I just want them to keep doing it. I'll keep buying the music and keep listening to it. You will never meet a bigger Kesha fan in your entire life. I am it. When it comes to dudes. Anyway, I know more than my wife. I really want to go see her in concert and hear Gold Trans Am. But Katy Perry did a documentary in 2011, Part of Me, which is sort of, it plays into like the Justin Bieber,
the Hannah Montana and Jonas
those sort of
concerts.
things where it's like shows the life of a pop star, and then it shows the songs and her dating life and all that sort of thing. And as dumb as this is, I really like the look behind the scenes, because Katy Perry for me is one of the most fascinating pop stars I think I know. Because Katy Perry started out making Christian music. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. And she dated Matt Thiessen from Reliant K. So when I like, she sang backup for POD. When I saw them on Letterman, there was Katy Perry. So then when I see her jump on the scene and she has her own unique voice and she finally gets to tell her story, I'm like, yes, you found your voice. You're doing what you love. I love it. Keep doing it. I want more. And her latest album, I call it the Clown album with Daisies and Never Really Over and everything. I like the direction she's taken with the maturity she brings to her music while still being the Katy Perry pop style. Because a lot of pop artists don't have a tendency to mature with their music. You can keep your style, but you can still be the party person, but you have to sing a few songs about mature things or pop one ballad on there. I'm looking at you, Nicki Minaj. You can't just be like 36 singing Chung Lee. I get it. You're 36 and you're horny, but gotta be a little more mature. Or Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion will come and replace you. Just saying.
I don't think any of the three that you just mentioned are beyond salvageable, but that's just me.
Yeah, I just think Katy Perry's done a great job with her career, and this is just a stepping stone. Faces Places. Have you seen this?
I have not, but do tell.
So Faces Places is a documentary from 2017. It is all about Angus Varr, who's like this famous sort of like landscape designer who just, and basically they go from place to place. They find ugly places. They find unique groups of people, whether it's a construction yard, a dam, a quarry, a train yard, and they'll paint and decorate like faces on things. And it's so awesome. Like, it's really, really cool. They go to do the shipping yard at a boating place. And they paint because there's the three main folks who work there. So they take a bunch of shipping containers and a couple days and they paint their wives on the shipping containers because their wives never see them much. They go to trains and they paint over graffiti trains with eyeballs and various cool things. They go to a dam and they paint like a goat in this abstract style. And it's just these people roaming around creating art, and I love it. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen Faces Places.
I think I saw it being advertised when it came out because you said 2017, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing posters for that, and I wasn't super into documentaries at that point. I'm just starting to get into them now that I've had to binge so many in preparation for this list. But I mean, one of the reasons we wanted to do this video is because I wanted to hear you talk about a James Cameron selection that's on this list. And I ended up getting much more immersed in how great it can be to tell a true life story and tell it properly while still being incredibly entertaining. And my first selection was one of the earlier examples that I also saw back in 2017 and was on my honorable mentions for the best of the year at that time. And my number 6 is Gilbert, a Gilbert Gottfried story.
Again, I don't know much about this, so please do tell. I just
so to answer everyone's questions, yes, they did seriously make a documentary about Gilbert Gottfried. It comes from Neil Berkeley, who's best known for directing the Harmontown documentary and dissecting the kind of personal struggles that Dan Harmon was going through during and after touring for the podcast. Mm-hmm. And when Berkeley came to Gottfried saying, "I've always wanted to make a documentary about you," Gilbert gave him the sage advice to try aiming higher in life. And I think we can all agree on that, whether you like this movie or not. But I got to be honest, I've always liked Gilbert Gottfried as a stand-up comedian just because dude is so fearless and unfiltered when it comes to his material, and his comedic structure is very unique. A lot of people refer to him as a comedian's comedian because he knows how to make the introduction, the setup, the segues, the punchlines, obviously, and even explaining what's so funny about the joke. He can make you laugh by doing all of those things. And with your permission, I would love to reenact a joke that I promise isn't
I would just like to say before you do this that he looks like a louder, uglier, older Jerry Seinfeld.
Very much so. And not going to lie, his voice can be grating once in a while, but it's really his material that saves him for me personally. So this is the last joke he told during the George Takei roast at the Friars Club. Please. Free salesmen go to a barn house. They say, "Can you put us up for the night?" The farmer says, well, I have one big bed and you can all fit in it. So they lie side by side and then go to sleep. The next morning, the salesman on the right says, boy, I had a great dream. I dreamt a girl was giving me a hand job. And the salesman on the left says, that's funny. I dreamt a girl was giving me a hand job. And the salesman in the middle goes, I dreamt I was skiing. See, because he was jerking them off. He was jerking them off, but there was no ass fucking. I wanted to end it with no ass fucking. Thank you. It's just, dude has absolutely no filter whatsoever. And in the words of Jeff Ross, I think that is what really draws audiences towards his sense of humor, even if they don't really like his voice. And what I love about this movie is that it offers very detailed explanations to how he came up with his act to begin with. Because when he was starting off as a stand-up, he actually used his normal voice. And throughout the majority of this doc, you hear him in his normal voice. And it's jarring at first, but you get used to it because it's a little similar to what we're known from him. But when he was starting out in the clubs, audiences would not care about what he was saying. They would talk over him, shout, they would do the heckling routine. So he would keep raising his voice louder and louder to make sure that people were actually paying attention. And when audiences reacted to it so well, he realized he was onto something. And sure enough, dude is one of the most successful voice actors in kids shows. Because I mean, other than Aladdin, who else watched Cyber Chase as a kid and kind of remembers him as Digit, the bird that always hung around with them? I don't know if you were a Cyber Chase kid. Really? Oh, well, I mean, you're a few years older. I think you might have missed it right at that point. But, and it's also, in regards to its material, the people they select to interview, like Whoopi Goldberg, Bill Burr, Jeff Ross, Dave Attell, Artie Lang, all do a thorough job at explaining what it is about his material that's supposed to be incredibly uplifting, despite the fact that it is incredibly offensive. And they don't disregard the people who were pissed off by it. Whether or not you found the tsunami jokes that he made tasteful or not, because I got to be honest, I had never heard any of the jokes up until watching the documentary. And because they saved tweeted pictures, him and his wife have saved them, they did read out a few. And I'll be honest, I laughed at one of them and I felt incredibly proud that I was the only person in the room at that point. But regardless of whether you found it tasteful or not, respectful or not, his intention was never to make fun of Japanese people for the situation they were in, but to take the tension out of it. And we find out that he does it to people, his friends and family, all the time. When his wife's grandma died, she was so upset that she wouldn't be able to call her anymore. And Gilbert goes, well, sure you can. She just won't answer. And she laughed and she felt better about it. Oh, this is the kicker. We see a little bit of Gilbert's younger sister, Arlene, who was a photographer and unfortunately passed away from cancer after the movie was completed. We see him joke about her during her chemo session. That's how far he's willing to go to make people laugh during their toughest times so they can at least endure it as best as they can. And I think that's what makes him such a great comic. But when we see his home life, he is as far from a stage persona as you could possibly can. If anything, he's as quiet and unwilling to talk about anything in regular life as I am. And oddly enough, Neil Berkeley finds a way to maintain a visual style throughout this documentary. Whenever he's at home, whenever he's with his wife and kids, he's shot in close-ups to emphasize how shy and withdrawn of a person he actually is. And when he's on the road, when he's waiting for his bus to take off, waiting alongside other passengers, some of whom recognize him from Aladdin, whenever he's waiting for a bus, whenever he's in a hotel or waiting backstage in the comedy club, he's filmed in wide shots to make it clear that living on the road as a comedian is actually very lonely and isolated. And it's a tough thing for him to deal with, even though it does pay his bills. And he lives in an apartment where a fucking elevator is the front door. So it emphasizes the strengths and the weaknesses that comes with his profession to a great effect. And it humanizes him regardless of whether or not you like him as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate comedians who are a little bit inappropriate, but not cross the line, because I do think there is, Bill Burr is particularly one of my favorites. I think that we just don't get enough comedians who have balls and have guts and who just say it like it is anymore, because comedy is meant to comment on the situation.
Yeah, but also to like make us feel better about the situation.
I mean,
the finale of Gilbert, I'm not kidding, is a concert at a charity hospital for children, St. Jude's.
Good.
And I won't spoil what happens unless you want me to, but regardless, he had them laughing their asses off within like a couple minutes. That's the amount of pain that they were in, and that's how much they're willing to, all of these parents who have kids with cancer, among other ailments, who are relieved and happy that someone is willing to take that chance in order to entertain them.
I mean, I've always been the one to make inappropriate jokes. I made this joke in 2005. People thought I was too soon. I stand by that. It's funny. What did the wave say to Sri Lanka? Hi. I made this joke in front of my teacher. I was pulled aside. They're like, "You can't joke about that." I'm like, "Why not?"
What?
I'm like,
what fucking grade were you in?
Oh, in 2005. Grade 5, I think. Grade 4 or 5. Or
oh shit.
And then also I got in trouble in college for making this joke. Zahir is standing there and I write a script and he's like, "Yo, buy my mixtape." And he does this terrible rap. And Laura walks up and she's like, "Zahir, no, you are far too white. You need to stop."
I mean, it's college. They'll protest every joke even before you make them.
So all I know is I appreciate Gilbert Gottfried for making jokes he does. And Bill Burr. And I just sort of have that irreverent sense of humor.
Also, Affleck, if you're watching this, you hired an insult comic who made 9/11 jokes. The fuck did you think was going to happen?
I don't know. Polly want a cracker? I'll jump in there at my number 6, which one I think is one of the most behind the scenes making of documentaries I think I've ever seen. So this is the 2017 Netflix documentary, Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond.
Heard of this.
This is Jim Carrey trying to be Andy Kaufman. But it's sort of what we got with when Jared Leto was the Joker and he'd like deliver the dead rats or whatever and do all that nonsense. But he is literally becomes Andy Kaufman. And you watch Jim Carrey like fully in character as this insult comic. I don't know if you ever watched Andy Kaufman growing up.
I don't know that much about Andy Kaufman, and I haven't seen Man on the Moon. I know a lot of people like it, but I wasn't so well versed in the subject that I haven't really gotten to it yet.
When Andy Kaufman came along, comedy was Steve Martin, it was Richard Pryor, it was some of these things, but the comedians were likable. He literally wanted to wrestle women in the mud as a joke. He wanted to get punched in the face on The Tonight Show. He wanted to sing badly and thought it was good. This guy was the driest, most like insult comedian on the planet. His routines and bits, you would think he is bombing every single one of them, but he is nailing this dry, stupid humor where the audience is yelling "fuck you" at him. That's what he's doing. And Jim Carrey playing him for Man on the Moon nails it. But it shows him this slow descent into madness of becoming Andy Kaufman. He starts to give the same gift. He starts to act the same way. Even like Andy Kaufman's mother swore that Jim Carrey was Andy Kaufman. Like he was so well cast in this. Like he literally became what Andy Kaufman was. And the director couldn't work with him. The writer couldn't work with him. Everyone around hated him, but they couldn't deny the genius that Andy Kaufman was. And Jim Carrey embodied that. And so there's this fascinating documentary, Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, that they make. And like the study that went into it, it really shows you that Jim Carrey can become a character. And I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love Andy Kaufman is funny. People do not find him funny, but I do.
Oh, I completely understand it. I only know one of Kaufman's routines. It was something that apparently got him kicked out of the Comedy Store. It's just him sitting down on stage eating ice cream, which is exactly what it sounds like to most of you. And it's as absurd as it sounds, which is exactly why it was funny.
Yeah. I like Andy Kaufman. He did what people told him not to do. And I admire that.
Those are usually some of the best.
But seriously, if you get a chance to watch his clips, like, he really pissed off a lot of people.
Oh, I'll bet. I can't imagine Milos Forman being an easy guy to work with before, so I can only imagine what Jim Carrey put him through.
So that's my number 6 because I was just fascinated by this. This was right after I finished up college, so this was something that everyone was talking about coming out for the trailers. So as we were finishing up college in 2016, we saw this trailer, and like a lot of us film nerds were like, "Oh, what's this?" And then it came out, and I watched it. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that's a really great documentary. And then I went and looked up everything this man ever did, Andy Kaufman. I'm like, this man is a genius. He's a certified damn genius. I appreciate this man here. And I appreciate Jim Carrey's portrayal. And it was sort of like the first big Netflix documentary. I do believe it was nominated for Best Documentary Feature.
Now that you think about it, it probably was one of Netflix's big ones. It's not the biggest. That would probably be Beyonce Homecoming, because when that came out, everyone was just super excited to see what she had to offer as a director, because they hadn't seen Lemonade and they had no idea she was doing Black is King. But based on her star power and her image and her message, everyone just was floored by how much they loved it. But yeah, Jim and Andy was probably the first one to kick off Netflix's documentary popularity for sure.
Yeah, and he also made 1999's Canadian. So Chris Smith made American Movie, which I haven't seen, but I understand is hailed as a classic.
See, I haven't seen American Movie either, but I've heard the amount of reputation it has. So sorry, folks, American Movie's not on our list, but it's about
but same director as American Movie. So
what I do know,
level of class to it.
What I do know, because it was on Angry Video Game Nerd's favorite movie list, it was just about how fucking exhausting and difficult it can be to make an independent film, regardless of how big or how small your budget is. Because
tell me about it.
Dude was making a short film for probably about as much as we could cough up, and he was having the worst time ever. And on top of that, he wasn't the greatest guy in the world. He had some drinking problems. He relied on family members for his movies much more than we do, so there's some saving grace there.
Never rely on your family members. They can't act, and they only have limited time, so they give you very bad things.
No, but apparently the uncle that he hires is apparently one of the greatest people in movie history, because of how dude just didn't give a fuck whatsoever.
But yeah,
at least that's what I understand.
Number 6, Jim and Andy. Coming in at number 5, we tied with Peter Jackson's They Shall Not Grow Old. Tyler, what do you love about this film? Documentary.
Well, I knew we were going to overlap on this before, because when we were talking off camera about what not to put on our list, you were like, don't put We Shall Not Grow Old on there. But it's just like, but I want to see They Shall Not Grow Old. And you're just like, okay. But watching this movie, I think this is the movie for us to overlap with, because this is just a crash course on how to make a documentary unique, stand out, stylish, without ever sacrificing the story and the integrity. Because up until semi-recently, like I keep saying, I always associated documentaries with just cutting back and forth between interviews of people staring at someone off screen combined with footage of the exact story they're telling. And there are plenty of good examples like that. My top 2 do kind of fit that criteria, but They Shall Not Grow Old just proves that you can portray history in a respectful manner just as well, if not better, through visuals. The first and third act of the movie, which is before and after the First World War, are portrayed in black and white 1.3:3 aspect ratio that looks like a moving Polaroid photo to give you this nostalgic, comforting feeling. All the while, soldiers from the beginning of this movie to the end are narrating over and over about how they were claiming to their commanding officers as they enlisted that they were 19, and even though they most obviously weren't, nobody gave a shit because every man counted. So much so that even if you didn't believe in war, you enlisted completely out of pressure. So there's a nice contrast to the black and white news footage that feels incredibly comforting, but the stories just tell you the exact opposite. And then the highlight of the movie, as everyone points out, is that the war portions are filmed in widescreen, colorized, and they give sound effects and voice actors for people in the background to make you feel as if you're really in the moment when these soldiers. And when I found that out in 2018, I was skeptical, and admittedly, that was the reason I didn't go to Landmark to see it. I feel really bad that I hadn't.
We played
and there
it.
are some people, yeah, I know you guys played it too, but you know what I mean. And I did see a couple people on Letterboxd who seriously think that colorizing it, adding in those effects was just a cheap shot for Peter Jackson to show his special effects work. But he put it best. The soldiers did not experience war in black and white. They saw it full on in color. And to him, that was the most respectful way to portray the story. And I 100% agree, because it shows us that war is grittier and more haunting and more horrifying in color than it is in black and white.
Mhm.
Take the exact shot of a soldier with his brains blown out or a dead war horse's remains after there's an explosion during these battle sequences where the cameraman could actually film the destruction without getting their heads blown off. Just show it in black and white and show it in color. Black and white looks bad already, but in color, you can barely look at it. It's proof that the smallest little details can make the biggest difference. And it can also, the real life footage with the colorization and the real life narration makes the true life facts feel all the more impactful. My favorite sequence is actually the last 10 minutes of the war scene where they're capturing German prisoners who are so cooperative and so fed up with the war that they're assigned to help carry the wounded over to the hospital camps. They share cigarettes, they crack jokes because some of them speak English. And it was weird, but it was also incredibly uplifting until you remember that World War II was the next World War and not exactly the same people. But even when the effects suck, even when the colorization makes certain faces look hazy, or the soldiers will be completely seamless, but the backgrounds look more like a moving mirage, it actually works to great effect because you never see the soldiers who are being interviewed. Chances are they were probably dead decades before this got inserted into the movie. They do credit the soldiers who are being interviewed, and that part was definitely great. But the effect of colorization not even working half the time makes it feel like a distant memory that is just completely forgotten. And it was forgotten back then. The last third of the movie, a guy talks about his coming home celebration. He goes to a store and and the store owner's just like, "The fuck have you been all this time?" Keeping the country safe and protecting your ass.
I think it's very interesting because when I was in school, we learned World War I, World War II, the Cold War. We barely covered Vietnam. It was sort of like a blip on there. The Gulf War we never really covered. And then we did a tiny bit on the Afghan War, but that was sort of current, so we didn't really get into it. And on Remembrance Day, they really, really focus on World War I and World War II because those were the great wars. Those are the wars that everyone can agree on without having to pick sides of who's right, who's wrong. They agree that Hitler and Germany was evil, as opposed to the Vietnam War where we were at fault, they were at fault, or the Gulf War where it was part of the Cold War, which they sort of link there, or any of these wars where they don't have a clear person to blame. And they always say how important it is for our freedom to honor these wars and show these wars. But I always found it very disconnected because anything they could show us didn't feel real, didn't feel connective. It didn't feel like anything that took place in a lifetime that I could connect with. So when I saw the colorized World War I footage and I heard the voices and the way they portrayed the narrative, the enemy and such, I think it actually made me start to understand the war. Because if we truly want to remember all our soldiers on Remembrance Day, you should remember every soldier that fought in every war in your family because they fought for our freedom. That's what they did. Whether it's the Vietnam War and they had to go defect, whether it's the Gulf War, which my dad was briefly in for a little bit there, whether it's the Afghanistan War, whether it's the war in Iraq, whether it's any of these wars, they need to feel real to you. And unless you have someone who is in that war, they don't. And the advertising they use on TV, they use a lot of World War I and World War II footage. And World War II, when we had it in the classroom, was restored in color, and they had narration and they had sound. So I could understand what they were trying to get us to remember. But World War I was this mess of 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, all these various types of film with different paces and speeds. Because 100%, when they did World War II and they showed the tanks, they showed Blitzkrieg, when they showed the Holocaust, it got to you because that footage felt like it could be in your time frame. But World War I didn't fit that. But when Peter Jackson did this, and I don't know if people call it a mockery to understand how these people lived and how they suffered. If so, I guess we shouldn't understand people, because I think I fully started to understand World War I and got their sacrifice, and the life in the trenches just sort of seemed like a silly joke to me, because it's like they dig trenches and wait for the other person to come. That sounds pretty dumb. But when they show the trenches, when they show the tanks, when they show the large pits and everything, there's more levity to it. There's that connection to it that you really only got through. The only thing we saw for World War I, besides some archive footage that disconnected us, was All Quiet on the Western Front, because they wanted to show which is a fantastic film, by the way. If you haven't seen All Quiet on the Western Front from 1937, oh my goodness, watch this film, whether it's in color or black and white.
I saw one adaptation of All Quiet in the Western Front, because I think the reason World War I is the war that Canadian history classes teach the most is because I think we were the most involved out of every single war. They didn't really dwell on Vietnam because I don't really think it was us that had a big part in it. We were definitely
if you went to Vietnam, you had to give up your Canadian citizenship, become an American citizen. I know,
but like,
so they disavowed them completely, which is wrong. I don't understand why they couldn't go fight in the war and come back and be a Canadian.
Wait, like they were posing as American soldiers, or
like you had to literally be an American. You had to. You couldn't be a Canadian.
Okay,
citizen.
I think that's why the war. I think that's why my history classes didn't dwell on it that much, which is interesting because my history teacher was one of the best teachers in general I ever had, because he encouraged everyone to think for themselves and not to take authority's word for it just because. You take his authority for it because he's sharing things that majority of teachers would be definitely afraid to show.
Yeah, there's a lot of curriculum.
He was lovable that way. Yeah.
But the Vietnam War, if you wanted to go, you had to disavow your citizenship, and you could become a temporary American citizen or a full American citizen, and you could go fight, but your country would not honor you. They would not give you any recommendation. We disavowed it 100%. So
yeah, and based on
what we did as a country is despicable. If you wanted to volunteer to go fight in Vietnam, I think we should honor that. I mean, no one says you had to go, but if you wanted to volunteer to fight, we should honor what you did. Whether it was a good war or not, it's not about that. It's about you wanted to go and fight for freedom. Maybe you didn't all want to do that, but I do think it's something that we do forget and something we should teach, even if it's just a small portion, because there was a lot of Canadians that fought in that war. And World War I, making it relatable, really makes Remembrance Day a lot more meaningful to me every year, because I've had family in the military for years, and I finally get what they went through, and I really, really appreciate that. So what do you got at number 4?
I feel weird calling this one a documentary because it's part concert movie and part non-narrative piece.
Okay.
It is a documentary called Pina, which you can actually find on the Criterion Channel, which is how I saw it.
This one.
Oh, so you have heard of it.
It's got Bjork in it, whatever her name is, that singer lady, right? Or is this the dancing one?
I didn't see Bjork anywhere personally, but I mean there was a lot to take in from it, and it's basically about the career of German dance choreographer. I'm going to try and get her name here.
No, this is
Pina
not Bjork. That's
Bausch. It's about German dance choreographer Pina Bausch, who was most famous for creating what she referred to as dance theater, where the sets and the music were equally integral to telling the story just as much as the choreography and the performers who are involved. And this documentary has a very artistic way of telling its story. It's actually not about the life story of Pina per se. It's a series of performances that reenact her most famous routines by her own company, combined with quote unquote interviews of her dancers who, when they're in the interview room, all they do is stare directly at the camera while thinking about what they're going to say in the voiceover. And then we hear the voiceover simultaneously about how they got into her company, the things that they learned from her as a teacher, and how much she's meant to them. And it's about as open to interpretation as to what each dance routine is supposed to mean, because from a casual viewing standpoint, there are going to be a lot of personal problems. There are no easy answers as to what each dance routine was supposed to mean, even if there was supposed to be a story or depth to it, because I got to be honest, half of the routines, I'm not entirely sure what the dance moves were supposed to mean. There's that whole philosophy about how each move says something about the performer or the character within the story, but I wasn't 100% convinced. And because dance theater has that pantomime feeling where you have to really express your emotions, be incredibly over the top, there are some moments that you're either going to laugh or be completely frustrated because the routines are just so over the top. And sometimes it doesn't help that they cut very abruptly from the middle of a performance to an interview with one person. And that was the most frustrating thing for me personally. I would have liked to have more segues where you just see the performance from beginning to end, then the interviews, then the performance. But I can't deny the fact that I had a really great time watching these incredibly talented performers executing routines that are incredibly difficult to perform and communicate, while also trying to dissect what each routine was supposed to mean. Because watching this movie felt like dissecting the animated shorts that we covered. There's one routine in an empty cafe surrounded by tables and chairs, and one woman with her eyes closed is still dancing, but a man is pushing all of the chairs away as she's nailing every single move. And it gets more complicated when, once he's out of chairs and tables to move, a man who also has his eyes closed walks into the cafe. The two of them come face to face in a romantic way. So the man who has his eyes open takes the blind guy's hands, moves them out, places the woman dancer in his arms. So he has to hold on to him as like a loving embrace. And just when that guy thinks his work is done, he walks out of the cafe, but the blind guy drops her. She gets right back up, and they embrace in a hug. So the person who was fixing them just comes back in, does the exact same thing, takes the guy's arms, holds them out, puts the woman in his arms, and is just like, okay, stay there. And the routine repeats itself over and over again. There are so many dance moves like that, and this one routine where it's just a man and a woman in this outdoor location, because one of the most unique visual things about Pina is that half the routines are actually performed outside in various locations of Germany, sometimes with people who probably aren't in on the bits, some with people who definitely are. And they take a huge advantage of the locations. It was apparently filmed in 3D because there was that 3D craze at that point. But there was the cafe routine and this one where it's just a woman doing those trust falls where they fall over and expect the partner to catch them. The whole routine is just her falling on purpose, willing to trust this person to hold on to them. And that's when it hit me. A lot of these routines that Pina Bausch created were about communication and trust between partners and especially lovers, because some of them do have stories. There's one where a woman tries to embrace a man, but he ever so gently keeps caressing her away from him. He walks away. And again, the circle of life repeats itself over and over again. And I think circle of life was the kind of philosophical belief that she was really into. And it's a miracle this movie even got made, because before they were about to start filming, Pina actually died. And the director, Wim Wenders, who also directed Until the End of the World, which is also on Criterion.
Pope Francis, a man of his word, was a huge hit at The Princess. Very interesting look at Pope Francis, and not entirely biased towards the Catholic Church. It's sort of like it plays both sides. It's sort of an unbiased doc. It's very interesting.
Wait, Wim Wenders made a documentary? Oh, okay. But yeah, so she passed away right before they were about to start filming, and he felt bad. He decided to cancel it. But after a couple of years, the company that she created was like, we want to finish this off to respect her legacy. So they did, and they ended up filming the majority of the indoor sequences in this one empty theater that has a very small audience that are the other collaborators. And Wenders has such a beautiful directing style. He uses a lot of different techniques like matching scene transitions or longer takes during some of the routines to really emphasize just how much crucial rehearsal went into these. And it was just stunning.
Yeah, this is one I almost saw at the Princess, but I didn't get a chance to see. And I always was fascinated by the poster. And we were doing the poster sale a while back. My brain was just like, oh, that's a neat looking poster.
You wouldn't happen to still have that, would you?
Probably. I haven't really looked at posters in a while. I'm ironing posters, but not much else. But yeah, pretty sure.
So you got it. So you got back in.
Yeah, we're doing a few things here and there, but yeah, I'm fascinated by the take and the. Yeah, I never got a chance to see it because I've never been super into ballet. I don't mind a little bit of ballet, like
I'm not either,
opera,
but I mean,
where they throw like a random occasional sequence at an opera house in like Mission Impossible or James Bond or one of these spy flicks, or they use it for a background piece in Red Sparrow. But like, I've never been super into ballet. Like, respect the art, mad respect. Like, I've seen Swan Lake on stage at Center in the Square a couple times because Swan Lake's pretty cool, or the Nutcracker suite there for the Christmas thing there, which is pretty awesome. Watch that on TV. So
yeah, I'm not a super big ballet person either. I have cousins who are huge into dancing and have done competitions in the States that they're incredibly proud of. But even if you're not a fan of ballet, it's also the direction, the costumes, the sets, and just about everything else that goes into making these as presentable and as cinematic as possible.
I mean, I saw Black Swan, and that's a terrifying ballet movie. So, I mean, mad respect to those doing ballet.
I still need to make time to watch The Red Shoes because I've heard good things about that.
I've never heard of that.
Really? That's also a Criterion. It's apparently one of the most popular Criterions.
I thought that was 8.5 by Federico Fellini, but that's me. Coming in at my number 4, one of the ones that I watched in school and I thought was absolutely fascinating. This movie does have a bias, not a huge one, but it does have a bias towards energy companies, which is fair because no one gives them any bias. So I'll give it a pass. Who Killed the Electric Car? I don't know if you're familiar with this documentary.
I did watch it in school. I didn't finish it all the way through, and I can't remember why my teacher didn't. I know that for some reason, Mel Gibson was one of the people being interviewed.
Well, regardless, I found it fascinating how it's told its story. Because it starts in the 1970s with the limits of electric technology and various other things. And it basically explores how electric cars weren't a practical thing. And it sort of tells the other side of how they were really trying to get to renewable, clean technology with electric cars here. But then it jumps. It takes a jump about 20 minutes in after we get to our introduction. And it gives us the mid-90s where they're developing the electric car. And they develop the electric car, and they basically make a sustainable electric car through Ford and General Motors. General Motors being the main one. And they build this entire car that has batteries that can go 400,000 miles on one battery and a charge. They make a stylish version. They put 100, I think, 150 test units on the road. You could sign up to be a tester. And as soon as this happens, immediately the oil companies jump on it and say, no. And so what the oil companies do is they buy out GM, they buy the patents, they destroy the blueprints. It's very similar to what happened to, if you remember, the US does have a monopoly on manufacturing airplanes. And if you remember in the late 50s and 60s, Canada tried to manufacture jet planes. And they didn't really get any success till the 70s, where they created this very economical model that could fire jets and everything. And the US government came along and said, no, fuck you, destroy it. So at the bottom of Lake Huron is one of the only Canadian jets ever made. And that's where we get this scenario here. We get this car that's electric, that's powered, that's tested. We get clips of this car going. We get behind the scenes specs and how great this car would have been for the industry. And the oil companies are like, fuck you. We don't want you to have it. And now I think it's ironic because now we have electric cars, we have hybrids, but they mark them up. And the oil companies are still benefiting from this because you can't afford an electric car. If you're rich, you can buy a Toyota hybrid or one of these eco-friendly cars. But I think it's still interesting how this movie that was made in 2006, and there was a sequel, which I didn't get a chance to see, Revenge of the Electric Car, sort of predicts how they don't want us to have things that will help us out. They don't want products to last long. It speaks to the economy where if you bought a TV in 1970, it would last you 15, 20 years. You buy a TV, it lasts you 4, 5, 6 years if you're lucky. There is this disposable consumerism that this whole documentary comments on, that we're fine with things breaking. We're fine with things only lasting a little bit and spending more money when, what if things lasted? Wouldn't that be great? What if we could save the environment? Like, what if, like, as much as I don't think Greta Thunberg is going to make a change, she's got guts. No one is ever going to tell Greta Thunberg to go away because she's going to come back and tell you you're wrong. And I have mad respect for her. I just don't think anyone's listening. And I don't think anyone's listening to electric cars. People aren't listening to this. People want to hold on to their monopoly on whatever it is. People want to hold on to the monopoly of oil, to their grain, to the dairy farmers of Canada. They hold a huge monopoly on the milk price. And that's why the milk price has been driven up for many, many years and is not affordable. I know you got to make a living wage, but there is a certain level of, we shouldn't have to pay that much for this, for food, for meat, for this. But with all these, with your unions and OPEC, why do you think the gas price can be controlled at whatever we want? Why do you think it raises on long weekends? Because it makes a bunch of people in a foreign country money. We don't own our own oil sands. We don't own our own steel. There's a monopoly on the steel from China. The oil is owned by Arabic countries, specifically heavily Saudi Arabia, and they control the worldwide price. There's a monopoly on things. People don't want to lose their power. People don't want to lose what they have. And that's exactly what Who Killed the Electric Car speaks to. People introducing things that could help people, but because there are oil companies, because this would cut down on their sales of gas cars, there are many factors that led to Who Killed the Electric Car, and people don't want to lose power. People are afraid that if they're not in charge, what's going to happen? Probably change, probably better. So Who Killed the Electric Car? That's my political rant for the day in a polite manner.
So my number 3 selection is...
Don't worry, I have this is just the one that what's your number 3?
Sorry, I couldn't help it. I'm just realizing, like, so my number 3 selection is probably the best segue we've ever had.
Is it a political thing?
No, I mean, I obviously don't disagree with corporations trying to keep things broken as long as they can.
Yep.
I also agree that Greta Thunberg definitely has guts. I don't know if
she has guts. I want her to do something. I don't know what she's going to do, but I want her to do.
Well, I mean, part of making her methods work is getting people to listen, and alienating people doesn't exactly help. Somebody really ought to let her know that.
Yeah, she's just so passionate about the environment. That's her thing. I'm just going to let her do it because someone's got to be. No one else is doing it. Who else is that passionate about the environment? No one.
You know how many times DiCaprio has found a way to talk about the environment every time he's interviewed and every time he wins something? I mean, honestly.
Yeah, but DiCaprio's not doing anything. Greta Thunberg is doing things. She's giving speeches. She's trying to raise money. She's protesting. She's skipping school. She is trying to make a difference.
Here's the thing. She has money to make a difference. People don't realize this. She's fucking rich already.
Yeah, but she wants other people to give a shit. That's what she's trying to do.
Yeah, and like I said, if the trailer for her documentary that you guys showed is just like, we will be frustrating, we will be assholes, and I'm just like, you do not know how to do this, and you would know.
It's a fascinating doc, but it is so full to the one side without even showing the other side. Well, I mean,
and I got to be honest, I've listened more to the other side that's more skeptical of the environment, not because I necessarily agree with it. In fact, there are a lot of things about the environmental skeptics that I think are full of shit, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't think they raised some valid points, because even though the problems with the environment are fucking real, there still is a little bit of sensationalism that kind of.
Oh yeah, there. I don't know. Like global warming, people say, does it exist? Does it not? I'm like, well,
okay,
I don't know.
If someone says it doesn't exist,
I don't know.
You're not gonna help them.
I mean, I feel like it's pretty real since things are happening. So that's my thought. I'm not educated, but like they're melting the ice cap.
Yeah, and that's the other reason I don't get into the environmental stuff. I don't act like I know everything. I don't. And weirdly enough, there are some scientists who don't either. I mean, look at the 70s where we thought there was going to be an ice age.
Yeah, I do think Ice Age is a great flick. I like the squirrel. I like the first 2 or 3 in the franchise. I think they're fun. Me and the wife. The first
two are fine.
Me and the wife like them. They're cute. We grew up with them, so nothing.
Pretty much.
We like the Ice Age movies. Not anything past like number 3, because that's where we're sort of like we grew out of all those things. But Ice Age 3 had that short where it was like the iceberg was melting. That was pretty cool. That was in the trailer before everything. It was like the first DreamWorks short. But number 3, what do you got, man?
Number 3 fits the special type of documentary where you've seen it once, you have seen it 1,000 times, and it is just so fucked up that you never want to revisit it again. And I didn't think I would have to in order to get notes for this video, but boy, was I wrong.
Ooh,
and I had to reinvest myself with one of the toughest movies I've ever seen in my life, Tickled.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned this.
Yeah. I'll give a refresher for anyone who is thankful never to have seen it before and probably never will after I do this. Tickled stars New Zealand journalist David Farrier, who is best known for just covering like the most weird and wacky news stories that are basically the uplifting puff pieces that you would get on CTV nowadays. Only more entertaining because it's New Zealand. Shit actually happens there. But one day he came upon videos demonstrating this sport known as competitive endurance tickling, where one man is restrained, and yes, with those kind of restraints, and 2, 3, many other men start tickling him. And I guess it becomes a contest to see who could last the longest without verbally tapping out. That was my best assumption of trying to describe how this would be sold as a sport to people. And needless to say, Farrier as a journalist was so dumbfounded by what he saw. He knew this was going to be his next news story. So he contacted the producers of these videos, Jane O'Brien Media, for the sake of conducting an interview. Instead of getting a yes or a no, he got an email saying that it was not in their best interest to associate with a homosexual journalist. Now, there are 2 things wrong with that. One, well, actually, okay, there are 3 things wrong with that. One, he's bisexual, not gay, so they couldn't even get that part right. 2, just say this shit out loud. Like, grown men being restrained onto a mattress and they're all wearing Adidas soccer clothing is slightly gay, whether you want to admit to it or not. 3, what exactly is your press, especially when this stuff gets presented to other people? Because he did blog about this before making it a documentary, and he got threats from American and New Zealand lawyers threatening to sue, and also insulting his gay Kiwis, because Kiwis.
Okay. I genuinely have questions. I genuinely have so many questions.
Oh yeah, I'll bet you do. But if I'm being honest, I don't think I can answer any of them for you. But needless to say, this amount of pressure only motivated Farrier and his co-director Dylan Reeve to investigate even further. So they do go to America. They do find one of the studios where they make these videos and try to actually get in to try and interview the subjects who are part of the videos, and it goes about as well as you would expect. They do find people who participated in the past with these things, because obviously Farrier wanted to know what the fuck would possess you to take part in these videos when you saw advertisements for it. And of course, the idea of being tickled by grown men just seems so innocent to begin with, and plus they naively went into the fact that they were being paid $2,000 for it. So they make it clear they were lured under false pretenses and they should have known better. But what was even more frightening was that their audition tapes which were completely separate from the company and were not made by the company, were posted on YouTube, Vimeo, VO, so many other websites without their consent. And of course, when they complained to the company, Jane O'Brien sent these incredibly nasty emails making fun of their sexuality, even though these guys aren't gay, because they legitimately thought this was a sport. It did not occur to them that these were the most obvious fetish porn videos you could possibly come up with, but they were also being blackmailed at the exact same time. Videos were being sent to their workplaces, their friends and family. It cost them certain jobs at one point. One guy was a football coach at a high school, and he got let go from a team, even though he was the best person on the team, just because of the negative amount of press. The fact that they were labeled sexual deviants based on all this shit. It's fucking awful. Jane O'Brien Media sounds more like the head of the mafia based on the amount of power and influence they have over these innocent people. And what's even scarier is finding out who Jane O'Brien is, because needless to say, Jane O'Brien is not who she says she is. And Faria comes to the conclusion that Jane O'Brien is actually David D'Amato, a deceased man who worked for a school and may have been the person back when the internet was getting started that got tickling videos into a fetish to begin with, because dude went to prison for email bombing people who I guess said no to his advances, even though he was going under another female name and was soliciting these videos from other people online. Dude was probably the person who got this shit started. And even weirder, like, Faria tried going to the lawyer's office who threatened them, but what he didn't realize was it wasn't actually advertised as the lawyer's office. It was advertised as Jane O'Brien Media's office. And when they show this information to the lawyer who threatened them before, dude's fucking dumbfounded because he has absolutely no idea that he was being used. And Faria flat out said in interviews before, the title of Tickled does have a double meaning because it sounds funny, but it gets painful after a while and you can't get out of it because the tickler is the one with all the power.
Yeah, I haven't heard about this, but we're on this topic. Fetishes are freaking weird, people. They're freaking weird. I don't care what fetish you're into, it's weird. Don't try to justify it. Just own your weirdness and get the fuck over yourself. I don't know. Some people, I've known people who told me about their foot fetish. I'm like, no, we are not hanging out anymore. I just can't. I cannot. That is weird. I don't want to hear about it. I don't.
Let me make this clear. Like, fetishes are weird, but just I'm not against people having kinks or whatever. Just keep it to yourself.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't want to know about that thing you do. But no, this sounds like a fucked up documentary, dude.
Well, as every review points out, it goes from a documentary to a comedy to a horror mystery thriller. And that was the exact vibe I got. I wasn't planning on watching this, but a couple of years ago, it was Saturday night. We were watching something on HBO, and then the first few minutes popped up, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I heard Alicia Malone talk about this. And then it just got so bonkers. It turned into a real life conspiracy thriller that it was just hard not to look away. And you want to laugh at it because it's over absolutely nothing. But the lawyers and the guy that Jane O'Brien probably was, hearing them come face to face with Faria and Reeve, threatening them over the most basic things. Like, D'Amato went for the easy route by suggesting that Faria going from New Zealand to America was not on a journalist visa, even though he probably was. And honestly, if D'Amato wasn't dead, they probably would still be in court by this point.
No, I just think it's really interesting that this journalist stumbled across this, and they didn't stop him at the time if they thought he was a journalist. Did they know he was a journalist at the time?
Oh, they all knew.
So then why did they not stop him immediately from getting in there? Because if you're a journalist and you stumble across this story, you're going to talk about it.
Oh, trust me. Like, when they come across D'Amato and he claims, I've never been associated with Jane O'Brien Media, even though dude was fully prepared, even though dude knew who the journalist was when he approached them, all I could sit there was just like, you guys are the worst at hiding how shady you are. I mean, when representatives come from America to New Zealand or vice versa, and Faria has a sign saying like welcome this and that, it's just like, hey, why are you showing these names? I know what you think you're doing, but you're not. And it's just, you guys are the worst. How are you still profitable and how are you still thriving? And of course, we find out it's just through intimidation and blackmail.
Well, I heard about this documentary through a very interesting video from one of the people that I think talks about politics on YouTube the best, and whether you agree or not, I don't know if you ever watched a Shoe On Head video. She basically breaks down feminism and like completely like says, where are the roots of this? And she breaks down politics, and she has a lot of controversial views, but I also think she has a lot of great points. And I think people are allowed to have their opinion. I mean, I heard about Tickled through this video she was doing about how fetishes are going too far. And I'll link you the video if you want, Tyler. It's absolutely fascinating. But she talks about how if we normalize one fetish, then the next one gets normalized. And there's a lot of good stuff being normalized in society, like sexual orientation and such. But the more we normalize sexual orientation, pedophiles are literally thinking that they're right for being born attracted to kids. And there's very dangerous precedents in this. And there's dangerous precedents in Tickled and various other things. And it breaks it down. And I'm just like, this is terrifying. I never want to watch this movie.
Here's the thing. If these people knew that they were making porn, it would have been legit. But the big problem is these guys had absolutely no idea what they were getting themselves into. And you could chalk it up to them being young and naive. And they chalk that up about themselves. They know they're fully aware of the fact that they should have known better. But it doesn't change the fact that they were still led into this under false pretenses.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes with this, and there's a lot to unpack, but I'm glad someone covered it, because I mean, if you're a journalist, you came across this, you're gonna cover this story.
And dude's taking this in stride, knowing good and hell well how fucking weird all of this is.
Oh yeah. Well, I have a less weird number 3.
I would certainly hope so. Just full disclosure, my top 2 are uplifting. They're happy. You guys are actually going to appreciate them.
My top 2 are not weird ones. They're just normal documentaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
So number 3 is the first of my music docs that's on my list here. So this is a 2008 documentary called The Wrecking Crew. And I know you're not super familiar with The Wrecking Crew, so let me name you some names here. So this is the backing group that played on huge hits from 1960s, late 50s, to the late 70s, before bands like Zeppelin started to get their own footing. Brian Wilson, The Monkees, The Grassroots, Jan and Dean, Bobby V, Nancy Sinatra, Simon and Garfunkel.
Your ringtone.
Yes, my ringtone. Bob Dylan. These people are responsible for Help Me Rhonda, Mr. Tambourine Man, Pet Shop Sounds, California Dreamin', Monday Monday. We're talking Fifth Dimension, Up and Away, Stone Soul Picnic, Age of Aquarius. We're talking I Got You Babe by Sonny and Cher. We're talking Gypsy Trance and Thieves. We're talking Sinatra's Strangers in the Night. These people are iconic. And John Denver, they backed him for a couple of his albums as well. They backed so many people. Carole King for Tapestry. Minus Her Guitar is backed by The Wrecking Crew. You know who was on The Wrecking Crew? Who was one of the members who played guitar on The Wrecking Crew and went solo? Glenn Campbell. These are influential, huge musicians. Wow. And so to see this 2008 documentary that I watched on PBS, this was originally a South by Southwest Sundance thing, to see all these musicians creating my favorite music is incredible. It goes through the different eras and their hit songs. But the funny thing is, when you were a session musician back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even in the 80s, you'd play on a song. You'd go in, you'd get paid to play, you'd get paid when you were in there. And as soon as you were there, you play the song, you spend the 2 or 3 hours cutting it out, Brian Wilson spent a lot more time with them, obviously, because he was a perfectionist. If you remember Pet Shop Sounds, 99% of that album was not played by anyone in the Beach Boys. It was all session musicians, and it was all very experimental. A groundbreaking album, nevertheless. A lot of musicians were just touring musicians back then. But then you go and hear the song on the radio a year later, and you're like, hey, I played on that. This Wrecking Crew played on literally some of the most iconic hits you could possibly imagine. The documentary features a lot of wonderful people in here. Zappa even used these people. Frank Zappa used a backing band at one point. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you've got Herb Alpert in this documentary because he used them as well. Because Herb Alpert, he had a full brass band, but he still used a backing band. You've got Glenn Campbell, you've got Dick Clark, who did all the New Year's drops. You've got Mickey Dolenz, you've got Peter Tork, you've got Nancy Sinatra, you've got archive footage of all sorts of musicians who played with them, and their impact on the music industry cannot be understated at all. And they played for so very long. But then in 1969, and this is the downfall, and this is one of the most interesting parts of it, we got 1968, 1969 psych rock hit. And as you know, I love psychedelic rock. But the number one reason for the downfall of the Wrecking Crew and this sort of use of a studio musician is Led Zeppelin, because they wanted to play all their own instruments. They offered them the Wrecking Crew. They're like, no, we got a guitarist, we got a drummer, we got a singer. We're just going to do it. So you get Zeppelin coming in here, and that's an interesting chapter. And a lot of people who sing backup vocals in here just happen to be featured on a song. Like, imagine that. Imagine you sing backup vocals on a song, then you hear it on the radio 3 or 4 months later, and you're like, oh, I sang on that. But you weren't credited because it was sort of session musician. You got paid and that was it. It's absolutely fascinating. I love music docs. There's a ton of these amazing music docs. There's the Zeppelin one that's really, really well done. But for me, my money's on the Wrecking Crew, because I think it really portrays early music in Hollywood, and it sort of breaks that facade and curtain that all musicians played their own instruments and that they all had their band and they all did this, because they didn't. That's just how it was. You didn't do it. You were the singer, and you had these random people, the best session musicians around. I mean, hell, even Johnny Cash used these people a bit too. Like, everyone and their uncle used them, because, you didn't have a string section. You were just the guy with the guitar, and maybe you had a drummer in your band or toured with you, but you probably used a session drummer because everyone used a session drummer. It takes this normalcy and this behind the scenes look that the music industry never wanted us to see. They wanted us to, it's sort of like they don't want you to see too many behind the scenes movie docs. They want to keep that magic, that illumination there. And then it shows us what it was like. And the Zeppelin is a groundbreaking band, not only because of their music, but because of the way they paved the way to recording as well. So that's my number 3, Wrecking Crew.
Very interesting choice. Makes me realize one of these days we're probably going to have to do like favorite concert movies just to balance
Last
this
Waltz.
stuff out.
The
Last
best,
Waltz. Oh,
The Last Waltz has the best version of The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, because the studio version from Songs in the Big Pink, I love the band because the band was, again, a backing band for Dylan and such, and everything they did with Dylan was phenomenal. Blood on the Tracks, possibly their greatest work with Dylan, but they really elevated him to a new level because he was popular, but then he really just didn't know where to go from there when music started changing, but the band took him there. But when Scorsese directed The Last Waltz, and they did The Wait, sounded phenomenal. They had all their guests come on. But when Leon is on drums, singing and drumming with that crass voice, that raw drumming, that twining banjo guitar style backing track that the band is providing, and they sang The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, I get tears in my eyes, because this is the last moment. The last moment the band played together. The very last moment, the effort. They're giving it all like they are a garage band. And then it ends. And it's beautiful. It's perfect. It's perfect. I love the band.
Remind me of my You remind me of my neighbors when they saw the last Tragically Hip concert.
I've never been a Tragically Hip fan, but I understand why people like them, because we don't have a lot of iconic Canadian rock bands to cling to, and they did create a legacy. So no disrespect there. They create great music. It's just not for me. I'm a bare naked ladies guy. I like If I Had $1 Million a lot. No one else does, but I really like the song. I do.
And it's fine. I got no
I have a
problem.
couple of their albums. It's really great Canadian pop music. But what do you got at your number 2, Tyler?
Well, with number 2, as much as I love Disney, there's got to be a Disney documentary about here somewhere. And there's actually a few decent ones, but
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from.
when you think of the Disney Renaissance, you usually think right away of Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, the 3 that really got it started off because of their beautiful animation, their lovable characters, and of course, one thing nobody can deny with their catchy songs and music. But what a lot of people don't know is that there was one person who a lot of film nerds hold directly responsible for making the Disney Renaissance iconic forever and revitalizing Disney animation, myself included, was Howard Ashman. And he has his own documentary called Howard. Now, for those who don't know, Howard was a lyricist and playwright who didn't actually play an instrument, but when it came to writing songs, he was so meticulous to make sure that the lyrics would advance the story and the character development in each Broadway play or movie musical that he would work on. And that was really where his talents shined. And it was his Broadway credentials working on stuff like Little Shop of Horrors, where he managed to maintain collaborations with future Disney composer Alan Menken that would serve him incredibly well along the way with basically being up to par with a producer and having a significant amount of creative control, even though dude had a lot going against him. He would hold studio staff board meetings to discuss how, in his opinion, animation and movie musicals were the perfect blend because there's this fantastical nature of breaking into song and dance that would only be believable in animation. And while I don't 100% believe that to be true, there are many cases where he definitely proves that otherwise. But I should make this clear. This is actually a documentary about his life from beginning to end. And even though the best parts of the movie are the last third, which feature most of the behind the scenes footage of him working on Beauty and the Beast in particular, that are just beautiful to watch. Dude was actually the one directing the singers on how to give their performances. He was incredibly essential to casting people like Paige O'Hara as Belle or Jodie Benson as Ariel based on the fact that they can act and sing because he had worked with them on some of his other shows. One of probably the most uplifting moment is watching everyone record Be Our Guest, which seeing Jerry Orbach and Angela Lansbury singing character, that was just mind-blowing. I had no idea what Jerry Orbach looked like. I only just pictured Lumiere up until now. So it was just insane.
And hearing Law and Order or whatever.
He might have been. No, that was somebody else. But anyways,
it's not one of those crime shows. I'm gonna figure that out.
You know what? He has a name that rings that way. But and then once they're done singing, everyone's gathered up. They're listening to the final product. They're anxious. They're worried that they might fuck up and they have to start over. But then it's exactly the way it sounds in the movie, and they're just so excited and so proud of what they've accomplished, and it just feels great to watch. But holding everything Disney-wise to the last third actually makes the movie more impactful because I've told you this before. Howard was diagnosed with HIV and AIDS about halfway through production of The Little Mermaid, and when you see him working on Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, he does look fine, but you get audio interviews of his boyfriend making it clear that dude was actually in a lot more pain than he led up to be, like a lot of people were at that point. And it gives the movie so much more of a emotional gut punch because now that dude had a limited amount of time, there was so much more pressure for him to create some of his best work yet. Aladdin was a huge passion project, and it was his original idea. The final product that we love now wasn't exactly what he wanted, but for the most part, it does match up with what he originally intended. Honestly, the songs that made it in are all the Genie songs, oddly enough. Arabian Nights, Friend Like Me, and Prince Ali.
I like
when he died halfway through Aladdin, or at least I think it was halfway through, that was when they got Tim Rice to do the lyrics with Alan Menken, and that's where you got One Jump Ahead and A Whole New World, which are all technically
this
really
makes a lot of sense now because tonally, like, the music seems off for a chunk of it.
It's incredibly different.
Yeah, and it's not that it's bad. It just seems like there's different people making the music, and this makes a lot of sense.
Oh, absolutely. One of the most famous songs in Aladdin is one that didn't even make it into the movie. It wasn't until the Broadway show happened that we got this one song called Proud of Your Boy, which was basically Aladdin's I Want song. He wanted to prove to his dead mother that he can change his ways, not be a thief, and can get by fair and square. And that did make it into the Broadway show. And it's basically become the signature song because Adam Jacobs, who played Aladdin on Broadway, did a really good job, has a great singing voice, and he even has his own album where he sings like some of Alan Menken's greatest hits. And also there were some deleted songs Ashman wrote that they could shove into the Broadway musical now. And it was a blessing. As whenever Disney Plus puts out their Aladdin live on West End thing, I'm definitely going to watch it just to see what his original songs were like and what would have happened if they were in the movie. But I'm not ashamed to admit, hearing how Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin were his swan songs during the last 10 minutes, I cried over and over again. Dude died like days after the original premiere. He wasn't even there because he didn't even weigh 100 pounds. It was really heartbreaking to watch. It was even more heartbreaking to find out that Alan Menken wrote the score for the documentary. And you can actually feel it the entire time. It feels beautiful. It feels bittersweet.
Well, looking at the credits for the documentary, Don Hahn, who produced so many Disney films, including Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, et cetera, directed this, and it seems fitting. Some of the producers from a bunch of these films, it's basically everyone who loved this man, basically making a tribute to his life. And I think there's something to be said for people who struggle through extraordinary circumstances. Freddie Mercury was one of those that literally kept making music up to his death. You could not stop this man, no matter what. Like Made in Heaven is one of the most emotional rock albums of all time. It's phenomenal.
And you can really feel the impact that he's had on his loved ones and his collaborators. Don Hahn, with this and Waking Sleeping Beauty, has a unique interview approach where he doesn't show the interviews. You just see archive footage and pictures of the people who are narrating these stories to us, and it feels more mysterious but also a lot more sad, because whenever they freeze or say sorry this and that, or they hesitate a little bit to talk about some of the people that had a negative influence on Howard's life, like his first boyfriend Snooze, that had a really rocky love-hate relationship when they were just starting to get into the theater scene. It's definitely more impactful to see them. Well, not to see them, but just to hear their voices. You pay so much attention to it. I also cried during the credits because there's a test demo of him singing Part of Your World. And I tried singing along to it so I could cheer myself up. And I found out that
didn't help, did it?
Eventually it did. There were actually albums of his test demos. There's one called Howard Sings Ashman that's on Spotify. And if you're a hardcore Disney fan, definitely check it out, because he's as a singer, he wasn't up to par with Jodie Benson or anything like that, but he was completely serviceable. And it's really interesting to hear his perspective of the songs and his perspective on how he changed the stories. I found this out. Sebastian was not originally supposed to be a Jamaican court composer. He was supposed to be Clarence, a crabby English butler, until he wasn't a crabby English butler. He was just an English butler, and he's just like, he should be Jamaican. And the directors are like, what? But we know now, based on experience, that it worked.
Well, I mean, coastal places, it makes sense. I like Sebastian as this Jamaican singing crab. It makes me happy inside.
Who doesn't love Sebastian? Well, I mean, when we did our Disney songs one, you trying to do Under the Sea was one of the major highlights.
I was obsessed with this song as a kid. It was like my favorite Disney song. So, yeah.
Which, like, when we did Disney songs, I knew I had to put a Howard Ashman song in there somewhere. I chose Part of Your World, and you chose Under the Sea. So it all works out.
I really like I do think Howard Ashman's legacy can't be understated for what he did for Disney, because Disney was suffering in the 80s. Like,
no one does.
Bad. They were not doing good at all.
Their animation studio was next to a bowling alley. It wasn't on Disney Studios property. That was how bad things are. And originally, Ashman was brought in to sing the first song for Oliver and Company, which weirdly enough is the one song that nobody remembers, no matter how many times they've seen it. It's the first one where Oliver and the other kittens are in the box, and then he's the last one, and it's raining. Does anyone really remember?
Yeah, that song just doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, exactly. And then he found out about Little Mermaid, and he took off from there. And there's so many great quotes from Disney about him. Like the poster said, he gave a mermaid her voice. He gave a beast his soul, which I don't know if you saw my review, but you can tell that I had a really hard time.
I did
at that point.
See your review, yes.
And I looked this up a couple days ago. Beauty and the Beast co-director Kirk Wise said, if you had to point to one person responsible for the Disney Renaissance, I would say it was Howard.
Yeah, I think this is. I think it took a very long time for this to come out. I think it was a very personal story to tell, and I'm glad they got to tell it.
Ironically, it came out in 2018 in a few theaters, so it could qualify for Oscar buzz, and then it didn't. So it sat on the shelf until Disney Plus became essential for quarantine, and they put it out in August, which didn't even get that much traction because everyone was watching Black is King or Hamilton, which I mean, Black is King is good and Hamilton is
Hamilton
awesome.
Blew my mind. I did not expect it to be that good.
Oh, I knew it was going to be good. It's just everyone thought, oh, well, we already have the album. What more do we need? A hell of a lot more, actually.
My number 2 is one I've watched many times.
Right.
And I can't pinpoint why I like it, but
really,
one of the most fascinating documentaries I've ever seen. It's called Honeyland.
Okay.
And this movie has no subtitles. It has no narrator. It just shows people living their life in this small corner of Honeyland. I probably mispronounced that.
Probably, but
and
whatever.
It follows a family going about their everyday life. They raise bees, hence the name Honeyland. They have cows and goats. At one point during this film, we see a kid get kicked by a cow. He gets back up, slaps the cow on the head, keeps milking the thing. We see the villain interactions. We see their marketplace. We see every last detail of their life, to where they sleep, how they eat, what type of food they gather, how they dress, how they sew. We see the hardships. It follows this town for 2 years. At one point, there's a famine, and we see how they work together to survive, to find food. At one point, there's a drought, and we see how they work together to find water. But they never tell you anything. You're watching. It's like you are watching this unfold. It's one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. I actually own this on Blu-ray because I like it so much. It's fascinating. Just watching people live. I don't know what more I can. You just sort of have to see it. Yeah, Honeyland. No,
ladies and gentlemen, we have discovered our shortest description of a movie ever. Round of applause, and it was Josh of all people that came up with the shortest one.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to see it.
Oh, no, I believe you. And judging by how dumbfounded you are, I'm kind of disappointed in myself for not checking it out before making this list. But what you're saying, it really sounds like the filmmakers have a ton of trust in their audience just to get the picture right away. And, you know, there were a couple documentaries I tried to get into about just living their lives and kind of the narration being the interview and also being the story. I tried watching Crumb, which was about Barry Crumb and his life and his career, but for whatever reason I couldn't get into that for the first 20 minutes, and then I got a text about my vaccine appointment, and then I completely forgot about it. So there were some other factors, but you know what, it was worth it, especially because I didn't get any of the side effects. So
that's good. You don't want side effects. You want it to work.
No, Well, I mean, you're also kind of anticipating it half the time just to make sure that you're not going completely crazy.
Oh, I mean, I'm fully anticipating it. I'm fully anticipating whatever I get to cause me blood clots. So it runs in the family. Everyone in my family, every male has had blood clots. So I'm fully anticipating health problems, but I have enough of those. So what's the difference?
Yeah, but aren't there vaccines that
well, when you're in my age demographic, you can't pick and choose. You get what you get.
Well, they're not going to give you what I got, because I got the Pfizer shit.
Yeah, well, we'll see what we get. That's sort of how it goes. So it's not crumb, but what is it?
It is my number one favorite documentary as of 2 days ago is Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Yes. I love
exactly.
This one. I love this one.
It is the only documentary I have given a 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and I am 100% confident in that, because this has got to be the most emotionally investing documentary I have ever seen, regardless of whether or not you watched him as a kid, regardless if you even agree or disagree with a lot of the stuff he says, because there were quite a few times where I disagreed with Fred Rogers, mainly for someone who was so popular on kids television. Dude hated kids television. He would look at something as so basic as a clown hitting people in the face with a pie, or of course the usual hating children's cartoons for how supposedly violent and too mature they were going for. That really pissed him off. I felt like he overreacted with a lot of those because of how escapist and kind of sort of confrontational they are.
How preachers are.
Yes, and for those who didn't know that about him, they're going to find out that dude actually was an ordained Presbyterian minister, but you also wouldn't have guessed, because for one, he had that whole philosophical thing about not wearing the collar to try to be more welcoming to other people, because, you know, he knew going in that there would be audience members who didn't share his exact same religious beliefs, but that didn't matter to him. Fred Rogers was, in my opinion, such a fascinating person, and director Morgan Neville and his editors, I'm going to try and get these guys' names right, Jeff Malmberg and Aaron Wickenden, did such a great job at explaining Rogers's motives, his methods, and his inspirations for how he wanted to make anything that could be mentioned mentionable, and how anything that could be mentionable could be manageable. That's one of the quotes I remember the most from A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is the fictional version. And if I got to be honest, I'd probably watch that just more often because of other details that I'll get into later. But Fred Rogers was a man who wanted to express kindness and compassion towards anyone, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sex, regardless of their sexual orientation, eventually, and I'll get more into that, regardless of political differences, shit that we could really fucking use right now. And I think that was why it hit me so hard when I watched it for the first time this week, because I miss people like him so much. When every kid in that day was watching the news and they couldn't understand why some racist douchebag was throwing bleach into a pool that had white and black people, what did Fred Rogers do? He pulled out a kiddie pool and asked Officer Francois Clemens to share the pool with him and wash their feet together.
Yep.
He taught things in such a subtle way, because really, what else did he need to say other than, hey, come on in the pool with me? He wouldn't have done it if he didn't think it wasn't the right thing to do. The same thing when Clemens eventually got outed as a gay man. And that did feature some of the more shady aspects of Fred Rogers as a person. He wasn't homophobic by any means, but he knew going in that at that time, if that was public knowledge, the show could be in huge jeopardy. And he was more operating out of concern for the kids. And he did, unfortunately, kind of encourage Clemens to make a lot of really stupid decisions, one of which was getting married to a woman, and that failed completely miserably, unfortunately. But at some point, it was going to be common knowledge, and sure enough, it was. And what happened? He did the exact same thing. He pulled out the kiddie pool and encouraged them to come on in like they had done before, because there was that entire health crisis about people wondering if they could catch HIV and AIDS just by coming into contact with anyone who had it. people like Ryan White, a kid who for a year was fighting just to go to a public school because he had contracted it from a blood transfusion, because dude was 10 or 11. He couldn't have been exposed to anything like that at that point, and there was no way of assuming he was gay, but minor details. And it had one of the saddest interviews where Clemens was talking about the time Rogers was saying, "I love you" on camera. And Clemens off camera was just like, "Were you talking to me?" And Fred just goes, "Yes, I was, Francois. I've been saying it for 2 years and you just heard it." And I was about ready to bawl at that point because it was just unbelievable.
There are so many emotional moments in this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
I specifically really lost it when the JFK assassination one just really got to me, when he's talking about why do people kill each other, and he nailed it in such a simplistic, childlike way with puppets that they could understand. And
for those who don't know, there was the Bobby Kennedy assassination, because they showed footage of that one in particular.
Yeah.
And what happened? Fred Rogers did an entire World of Make-Believe bit where Lady Aberlin was explaining to Danny what the word assassination means and teaching it in a way that, as you just pointed out, kids can understand without being overwhelmed. And it led to a segment of the movie that I kind of wish would have been focused on a little bit, which was the criticism that a lot of kids shows face nowadays. And sure enough, so did he, where it felt like there were parents who were concerned that he was coddling kids a little too much and that he was teaching them to have this sense of entitlement that you're supposed to be happy and kind even when it's undeserved. And in my opinion, I don't think he fits that criteria. And when I said to myself, I don't think that's what it is, I asked myself, why? Why do I cry my eyes out at Mr. Rogers and just get annoyed out of my mind whenever I remind myself that I used to watch Barney and Friends? Because both of those were PBS shows, and both of them are known for their incredibly sweet and comforting nature. But I think the big difference is Fred Rogers was never playing a character as he was teaching his lessons. He was truly speaking from the heart. Even in the make-believe segments, they heavily imply that Danny was an alter ego of the sad feelings that he experienced growing up as a kid, and that King Friday the 13th was him basically venting out his frustrations and what he thinks parents were completely missing the point of when they were raising their children. No matter how much the guy in the Barney suit believes the lessons that he's teaching, which somebody got to make a documentary about that guy, because
someone's got to.
He's interesting. He's interesting. Let me tell you that.
Pedophile, right there.
No, he's not. He believes in Tantra, which is weird enough, but that's a completely different story.
Well, I never really liked Barney.
Here's the thing, though. No matter how much the guy in the suit believes it, no matter how much the future Disney Channel stars who were the kids believed in it, because he had Demi Lovato, he had Selena Gomez, Debbie
There were a
Ryan,
lot of big stars that came up on that.
3 or 4, really, because I mean, most of them didn't go anywhere. No matter how much all of those people legitimately believed in the messages, and I'm sure they believed it through and through, it wasn't really them speaking from the heart. They were always exaggerating their voices. They were adding in all these stupid nicknames and catchphrases or whatever, and that wasn't Fred Rogers' thing. I feels weird comparing reality to fiction in this case, but I felt like for once it's actually warranted.
Well, I actually have a story to go with both of these.
Okay.
So the day is September 11th, 2001. And my sister is watching Barney, and I freaking hate Barney. And my mom, being American and us being very connected to America, we're not allowed to change the channel because my sister was throwing a tantrum because she wanted to watch Barney, I love you, you love me, freaking stuff. And so I'm really irritated at her, and she's just being stupid, and she has to watch her Barney. And we eventually changed the channel to see the Twin Towers. And again, I'm in grade 2 at this point, and I don't fully understand. And I think one of the moments that really got me in this documentary was when he came back to explain September 11th. And I had probably outgrown Mr. Rogers by this point. But he had such a gentle, concerning way of explaining. And this was the last time we ever saw him on TV. And I think it was really important for him to do this. I think it was so important for him to come out and do this. And I think that's one of his crowning moments, most of things, he said things that needed to be said. Because I grew up with Mr. Rogers. Mr. Dressup was creepy. I couldn't take that man. That was weird. I know
I was introduced to
me,
Mr.
He just creeped me out.
I was into Mr. Dressup first, and then one random day, I think it was maybe like 1 or 2 shows after that Rogers came up, but as you would expect, instantly I got hooked on that.
Yeah, and I think that Mr. Rogers he said things that you weren't supposed to say, that weren't cultural norms at the time, that weren't the way to do it, in a way that kids could understand. And I think that was the most invaluable. I think he's probably one of the best children's show for kids to watch even to this day. I mean, I've seen reaction videos online of people who are like 35 and like, I never heard of Mr. Rogers because, you know, this was an American thing. And they immediately get him. There's that immediate connection. He could be your grandpa. He could be your father. He could be your best friend. He's immediately relatable. And the one moment that made me cry the most in this whole documentary is when he's there and he's chatting with the kid in the wheelchair. And they do it. They have him come on the show, and he makes him feel really special, even though this kid is really down. And later this kid grown up presents him this award, and oh my goodness, there's no you'll go cry. That's how this works.
I think I'm feeling right now. I mean,
there's no way you're not going to think this kid is giving an award to the person who meant so much in his life, and it's so heartfelt. And the applause. This is the type of level where Charlie Chaplin got his Lifetime Achievement Award for doing all these films and finally being recognized. This is that level. Sorry, it makes me emotional.
No. Hey, how the fuck do you think I'm feeling right now? Like, as soon as you told that story of like the award show, I can instantly picture him going up, and then Fred is standing up and he's just like, and I just sat there. I'm like, oh my God, this cannot be happening.
No, it's so touching. Like, this is the saddest documentary, but the happiest one on the planet.
Yeah, no fucking kidding me. No fucking kidding. And like Morgan Neville and his editors, like I said, their approach to making interviews looks cinematic and wonderful. He has his guests look straight into the camera as they're talking, and it just feels so much more intimate when they're asked certain questions. And the questions about his childhood, which are explained in voiceover with those wonderful animated sequences where Danny is him.
Yep.
And that just instantly sums up how important the show was to him. It wasn't just a gig like that one journalist who started off a complete cynic, but ended up being a much more optimistic person, because we do see him in this documentary, and then we see him in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which couple of
really
things.
well
like
done,
one,
honestly. Different take.
If they were casting that reporter based on authenticity, they would have cast Joaquin Phoenix, because the two of them look completely inseparable.
Yeah.
But when you watch the documentary and the fictional one side by side, you realize they actually repeat a lot of the same stories that you wouldn't believe turned out to be true. Like the train sequence when everyone breaks down into song and you think that was just a Hollywood moment. No, that really fucking happened. And you know what?
Yeah.
It's great that happened. That's one of my favorite moments in that movie.
I think some of the best interviews in Won't You Be My Neighbor is the production coordinator and costume designers who worked on his show for like 30 plus years. And I love how they end the documentary, how they show the final days on his show, the final episodes.
When they're making pranks and cracking jokes.
Yeah, and I love that Mr. Rogers had a sense of humor. But I like how one of the final things he says to us through archive footage is, "You're perfect."
Which he struggled a lot with.
Brilliant.
Which he struggled a lot with, wondering if he was really reaching people. Yep. I don't know if you remember that bit where Lady Aberlin is singing to Danny about whether or not he's a mistake. Like, there's a fucking song called "Am I a Mistake?"
Yeah,
which
that broke me a little bit as a kid.
I mean, as soon as Lady Aberlin sings "I Think You're Just Fine," there would be that expected Barney moment where they instantly just go, "Oh, okay, well, that's great." And then he keeps asking the same question. I just sat there. I'm like, shit, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. This is one of the best docs ever made. Straight up.
Yeah, and you know what? I was really hesitating to struggle whether or not Howard or this would be number one, because they were both so fucking emotional, even without the nostalgia factor to it, because there was so much about all these people that we didn't know. And Morgan Neville, this will probably be his best movie ever. Yeah. But I'm super looking forward to his next doc, Roadrunner, which is about Anthony Bourdain.
I mean, anything I can only imagine makes this doc do, I will watch. So,
yeah, just like with Peter Jackson. Like, I think if and when theaters reopen, we're probably going to go see Beatles Get Back.
Oh, I am so excited. That actually leads me into my number one, because my number one is a classic rock. It's technically a two-parter, but I included it as one because they re-released it on a disc.
Yeah, that's fair.
The History of the Eagles, part 1 and 2. It is 4.5 hours, 3-4 hours, somewhere there. It's very long. It's a combination of the Hell Freezes Over concert tour, as well as going through their entire history from conception to how they were discovered, who they worked with, and how they created the music. And for me, one of the first, I got a few albums as a child. When I turned 6 or 7, my mom gave me cassette CDs, whatever I could play. She gave me Elton John's Greatest Hits Volume 1, which to this day is incredibly influential because Elton John is one of the best. She gave me Billy Joel's Greatest Hits Volume 1 and 2, which, well, that's said for itself.
Is that your music player back there, by the way?
Back behind me?
Yeah, the white, the one that's that your head's covering right now.
Yeah, that's my cassette player.
Okay.
Back there.
Yeah.
My amplifier and CD and record player is over here. My vinyls and all that stuff is over there.
Got it.
And she gave me the Eagles' Greatest Hits. Now, for me, I had never heard the Eagles. Maybe in passing, they had played Hotel California on the radio. So I put on this cassette I'm given of the Eagles' Greatest Hits. And it wows me the way it mixes Southern rock, blues, heavy emotion, incredible guitar work. Take It Easy, Lion Eyes, Take It to the Limit. Just blowing my mind. The guitar solo, the iconicness of Hotel California, One of These Nights. Just this sort of chill blues rock. The emotional desperation of Desperado about this man who wants this woman but cannot have her no matter what he does is emotional. And I love the Eagles. Like, their discography cannot be understated. Whether you're looking at their first album or you're looking at their second album where they do a little more prog rock and you have Lion Eyes and stuff. Lion Eyes is an emotional ballad. Or you're looking at Hotel California or The Long Run, or even when you get to Hell Freezes Over. Their discography encompasses levels of emotion that you don't expect from a band such as this. As much as the Beatles and Zeppelin, they don't have as much emotion in their music as the Eagles does. And that's 100% attributed to Don Henley, Joe Walsh, Glenn Frey, and Don Fender, who were the 4 original members. Glenn Frey unfortunately passed on. They've got a few other than the Paco lead singer, Timothy Beecham, is in there. So they come out with this documentary in 2013, and it goes on Prime, and I have Prime. And I sit there, and I'm just fascinated at the way they cover the majority of their iconic music, the breakup, the members, the drug use, the destructive behavior, the drinking, the very last tour, the way they walked off stage and ended it, the way how they covered through the 80s, how the band members were never quite satisfied because they really wanted to play together. And they always made this joke, we'll play together when hell freezes over. So that was the name of their 1990s tour, Hell Freezes Over. And the culmination of the whole documentary ends with the 4 members on stage playing that music, reliving that time, and realizing they made a mistake, and that this is possibly the greatest thing they've ever done in their life, is playing together with the Eagles. And you can see the unity in them as they get up on stage for the very first time in years after hitting the studio and creating some very interesting tracks. it's like they haven't skipped a beat. They just get up there and they play the chords to Hotel California. They play Lion Eyes. They end with their most emotional song, what was one about one of their divorces, Wasted Time. And it's perfect. They cut it together with the archive footage, and it's utterly brilliant and emotional. And you can feel that these guys have been apart way too long, and you're like, no, they need to be together. They need to play. They're friends. This needs to happen. The heat may be on Glenn Fry, but it's a fascinating look into one of my favorite bands. As much as I love the Apple series they did for the document for the re-release of the Apple albums, all the Beatles ones. They did on the iTunes there. They do mini documentaries. They put them all together to make a full documentary on them all. That's well done. And as much as I love a lot of these documentaries, this just hits home for me. This is the one I sit down and watch. I enjoy the music. The story doesn't get old because I absolutely love the Eagles. I am a country fan to a certain percentage. I'm a rock fan to a larger percentage. So when you combine country, rock, and blues, you got me. You got me right here. And when you combine that level of emotion you get with blues music and you put it into a brilliantly directed 4-hour documentary, I don't know what more anyone could ask for. I really thought about putting other music docs up here because I'm a big music doc fan. There's a Jethro Tull one. Zappa's really good. Aretha Franklin, Amazing Grace, that uncredited concert with interviews is absolutely phenomenal. To see such an early concert restored on film like that. But for me, it's the Eagles. I love the Eagles. I always will love the Eagles. They for me are the American band that defines American rock music to me. As much as I love the Beatles or Nazareth, I love Nazareth. I love Nectar. I love Floyd. I love a lot of these psych rock bands. I really like some of the later stuff. I like Grand Funk says we're an American band, but this is an American band right here. This is the Eagles. They make beautiful music and they make a great documentary subject.
Just in case you did put Zappa on here, because that did make it on your best of the year list last time. I did some preparation by watching him speak at Congress about anti-censorship and freedom of speech, which, man, talk about a pivotal point in history for music and for just about anything art related.
Let's just talk about Zappa for a minute, because this documentary's, I like how they use archive footage of Zappa and they go through his life from the early 40s as a kid to 1990. But the Congress thing is very interesting because there were two people that spoke at Congress over through the various years, Zappa being one of them. And Dee Snider of Twisted Sister went in and blew their freaking minds by explaining all his lyrics to Congress and what they meant and what he's trying to say. And I have so much respect for Dee Snider. Dee Snider is a legend for I Want to Rock or We're Not Gonna Take It. But his early club years, his rebellious nature, his anti-music that is music in this sort of punk hard rock scene is brilliant. I mean, shoot him down with a fucking gun. That is a good track. When you hear that pumping, man, your heart gets you. Even when you get to Leader of the Pack or later stuff, like their Christmas album is one of the definitive Christmas albums ever. They did a hard rock Twisted Sister style Christmas album. And Silver Bells is the exact same melody as We're Not Gonna Take It. It's perfect. It's one, I crank it up every year. I have mad respect for this man and what he has done for music. I have more honorable mentions I didn't get out, by the way.
Oh yeah, I have one or two.
Hit me with one.
One that I actually started watching yesterday was called Final Cut, the making and unmaking of Heaven's Gate, which it was like an hour and a half thing on TV where it was some interviews of actors and crew members who were part of the production. What exactly actually went wrong? What were some of the myths that were allegedly what went wrong? Like the animal abuse stuff was more than likely a rumor from a journalist who, when he got turned down, they, for whatever reason, hired him as an extra. And that's when his expose shit kind of came into there. Willem Dafoe narrates.
I haven't watched.
Willem Dafoe Willem Dafoe narrates this because he actually has a small uncredited part in the movie, which I don't think most people realize, but it just goes through all of, like I said, it goes through everything that actually went wrong. Like, was Michael Cimino a perfectionist who probably had more power than he probably should have? Yes. Does it suck that as of 1980, directors do not have anywhere near the amount of control that they should or deserve? Yeah, absolutely. But they also point out that the auteur theory was kind of starting to go under the water at one point because Peter Bogdanovich had his stupid musical with Burr Reynolds. Martin Scorsese had his musical with De Niro and Liza Minnelli, which some combination that turned out to be. And of course, pointing out William Friedkin with Sorcerer, a movie that I keep looking for because I really want to check that out.
Yeah, I haven't seen this, but I have seen clips of Heaven's Gate, so I'd be very fascinated to check this out.
This was my first time watching clips of Heaven's Gate because I've never seen it, and I'm kind of scared to see it because, well, you know why.
Yeah, one I was very fascinated with that I think was very heartwarming and delightful that we played at the Princess, and I think really deserved a lot more attention than it got was Biggest Little Farm. Basically, this couple bought 300 acres, they bought a ton of land in California, and they started growing self-sustainable crops. They adopted a dog. They went out there, they pursued their dreams, and it follows them through a wildfire and through like their animals being killed and like bad crops. And like 5 years later, they're being studied by agriculture because they now have a fully self-sustainable farm that doesn't hurt the environment, that everything on their farm is naturally homegrown. The bees make the honey, the cows make the fertilizer, etc. But they go a lot more deeper than that because they use a lot of natural irrigation. They don't have to like force water beds or anything. And it's delightful and it's happy. And even in like the saddest moments where like one of their dogs will attack one of their chickens or sheep or something, like there's still a level of positivity. It's like the next moment they're like, but the sunshine, and it's just delightful, and you could take your kids to see it. And I really appreciated that one. That came out last year, and Biggest Little Farm is just a delight. It will uplift you 100%. Yeah, I'll also throw Maiden out there. Have you watched this one? So Maiden is a 2019 film about the first all-female crew to sail around the world in a schooner.
Wow.
It's basically, it does have a little bit of Yes We Can, how the women are like, they told they couldn't do it, and she made her own team and stuff. But there's a lot of other good stuff in there about this woman who just wanted to sail around the world because she wanted to. It's her personal goal. And it's this group of women she brought together in college to sail around the world on a ship called the Maiden. And they made their maiden voyage and made it around the world and run. And it's sort of this one point in time in 1990 where they just wanted to do something and they did it. And it's really nice and very, very delightful. And luckily someone filmed the entire thing and they found all the footage in like 2015 and started making a movie out of it. So yeah, it's a thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I Maiden's pretty great.
I thought you were going to throw in like one of James Cameron's underwater docs because that was kind of how our conversation got started.
Oh, I just was going to let you throw out some more honorable mentions because I got like 8 more. I'm going to go quickly through them, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what was the other one. There was one in high school that kind of stuck with me called Babies. That was a very non-narrative piece. There was no narrator, again, no subtitles. It was about 2 babies in developed countries like England and America, I think, and 2 in developing countries, which I can't get right off the top of my head, but it's really just a year in the life of these kids and the different contrasts between cultures over how you raise a child or how one is able to raise a child. Which in the developing countries, they're more...
I have like a bunch of these posters at the cinema. So that's why I know what this is, because you could never forget this poster. It's just pictures of babies.
Wow, you made that sound natural.
Well, no, it's just like kids sitting on a. It reminds me a lot of
I mean.
The what's that one movie that the This Is Us people did where they have like the different pictures on it.
I don't want to remember that.
They made a movie anyway. I will throw RBG out there because Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a really great doc. I think that the one with Felicity Jones it's a decent film, but I prefer the documentary where she's talking about her own life. It's actually really interesting. She has a great sense of humor and totally worth the watch if you don't know much about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Echoes in the Canyon is very interesting. It talks about the 60s rock and roll sort of psych era music. But it does have a downfall, which it didn't make my list, is random band plays the songs in between and it cuts like concert footage of people I've never heard of before. And I really want to hear more of the stories, but the stories are fascinating because it's really interesting to see like when the Stones visited town or when Mickey Dolenz was naked in front of one of the Beatles. There's just like, and high on mushrooms. There's just a lot of interesting stuff to be had there. I'll throw out one that genuinely terrified me because I have an evil twin somewhere in Cambridge, Waterloo area. I'm not kidding you. It's a true story. Ask my mom. It's terrifying. Looks exactly like me. So I changed my style. Three Identical Strangers, about how these twins were like separated as an experiment. Did you not see this movie? So basically these three brothers went to a college when they were growing up, and they discover that they are brothers. They found two of them, and so they reach out to the media and say, "Look, we found these identical brothers and such." And they found out there's three of them. So there's these three identical brothers that were put in an agency, split up at birth. And the agency won't explain a single thing why they did this. But the documentary goes on to discuss that they did this with up to 50 sets of triplets. But no one will explain why it's happening or why they did it. But what they did, they placed them in a rich home, a poor home, and they would place them in different class systems. But no one will explain a darn thing, and everyone's died, and no one will give them the evidence. It's literally like there's two of me. Because I do have a twin. I met my twin a couple times in high school at this one church my dad wanted to go to for biking things. And it was like, we talked the same, we looked the same, we were the same height, had the same sort of hair, facial features. And it terrifies me that we might have been part of this experiment. I will throw Jane Goodall and The Woman Who Loves Giraffes. Jane Goodall worked with monkeys. The Woman Who Loves Giraffes is a local professor who's still alive, super sweet lady, comes into the cinema and worked with giraffes in the 1960s and 70s. Don Wall, Free Solo, the climbing docs are very, very good. Paris is Burning is a great documentary about fashion and being gay in New York and New York City in the 70s and the 80s, and sort of that first burst of LGBTQ plus pride. And the last one, we talked about it, Secrets of the Titanic. I sort of went into it last week, but I love the Titanic. I'm throwing that one out there. But yeah, Three Identical Strangers is terrifying because someone just wanted to experiment on twins and triplets and explain nothing and put them in different levels to see how they would. But the thing is, they would check in with the kids too until they got to like 12 or 15 to see how they were developing differently from the adoption agency. They literally put people that were all the same in different homes to see how they would develop differently for some fucked up study in Britain. You seriously need to see this movie.
I might have to now.
Yeah, so yeah, no one ever really explained what happened. So
well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you were enlightened.
Yeah, so those are there's so many documentaries, to be honest, but those are just the ones I wanted to. I'm a huge documentary nerd because ever since about 2016, I really just wanted a different type of film because I like the big blockbusters. I like the MCUs. I mean, I don't mind a big superhero movie. Some of them can be really, really good and it's really, really fun. I like the dramas. I like the indie dramas. I like the Oscar dramas. I like a bunch of those. I like comedies. I like spoof movies. I like dirty comedies can be really, really great. There's a lot of those out there. I like fantasy. I like sci-fi. I like Star Wars. But one thing I felt like there weren't enough intelligent movies in my diet, so to speak. So I started watching documentaries. I started watching older films, and documentaries just stuck. And now I'm like, I like documentaries. So, yeah. Tyler, where can we find you? you reviewed Ronnie's, right? A
I
documentary.
have reviewed Ronnie's, and you can check out my review by typing in my name. It's Tyler Wolf with 2 F's for fucking fantastic. Thank you for pointing that out at the beginning. And this upcoming weekend, I'm going to have a surprise review of a movie that I was not expecting to talk about, but the circumstances will be interesting. And I will start off with the circumstances in that video.
We'll just have to wait and find out, won't we? 2S for fucking fantastic.
Exactly.
Check out Tyler Wolf's channel. Also, if you haven't seen his interesting breakdown of the final season of DuckTales there, everything about DuckTales mini documentary made by Tyler himself. Check it out on his channel there. Lots and lots of good stuff. And check out all our Oscar coverage. If you haven't seen our previous shows of the Oscar animated shorts, one of the best shows we've ever done. Really fun to talk about. Really great stuff. Animation in the Oscars is the most fascinating category. I'm very convinced. It really has a lot to offer. It's very subtle. It's very interesting. Has something to say. This is the end of our show. Check out all our shows on RBT TV. We have my scathing review of Thunderball coming up this weekend. I hate that movie. Watch me tear it apart, because fuck you, underwater dudes with tubes and knives and boringness and mispaced things and weird film matching. I hate that movie. I own it in multiple copies. I'm a completionist. Tyler, say something awesome.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine?
Like my dad.
Would you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine?
Time to change my sweater.